much. Okay. I'm mad, you guys, that I started a few minutes early because I really wanted some tea, maybe a tissue, because you guys know I'm struggling with my sinuses. I hope you guys don't mind that I'm very, like, all I've been doing all day is basically been attached to my computer. So, because I've been attached to my computer, I've basically just been, sorry, I'm trying to change my mic if I can. See. Perfect. Okay, hopefully you guys can hear me a lot better now with no weirdness. I'm gonna need to not get all of these. Hold on. I'm getting weird emails from YouTube. I don't need YouTube emailing me about that. Yay. All right. So anyway, what was I saying? I was saying that I'm chilling today, y'all. I am saying I'm chilling. I am wearing no makeup. I'm wearing sweats. I wish I had a cup of tea. I'm actually upset that I started this live without tea because I'm thirsty. Sorry, that's a dog. So let's talk about what this topic is. I'm going to be going into really greater detail on this topic on my Patreon, but I wanted to just introduce it here, and that's power exchange. And so I think for people who are familiar with BDSM, they equate power exchange to something sexual. And the reality is power exchange is something that occurs in everyday life all the time, in every single relationship that you have, be that at work, be that within your family, be that on a political scale, like a big scale, how our country interacts with other countries, be that in business. There's always an exchange of power. There's always an acknowledgement of dominance and submission. And so why is this important to me? Why do I want to have this conversation? Hi, DeAndre. Hi, Kevin. The reason that I want to have this conversation is because there are like a lot of things that we need to accomplish communally, as individuals, and on a national scale and on a global scale. A lot of things that need to change. And I feel like a lot of times we have these conversations and we think we need brute force. We think we need numbers. We think we need a lot of things. But what we fail to understand is that there's a reason why certain oppressions are able to prevail for long periods of time. And that's not numbers, right? Because if we look at things like what happened with India and Mahatma Gandhi and things like that, they outnumbered the Europeans. So how did such a small country manage to control a much larger country? When we look at things like slavery, we ask ourselves, how was it that these people were outnumbered but still managed to have control? When we look at the apartheid, when we look at a lot of different situations throughout global history where a minority has oppressed a majority, it has nothing to do with anything but a power exchange. And the first barrier in overcoming and taking the lead in a power exchange situation is the mental, right? So I want to touch on things that we do like on a micro level as individuals and things that we do on a macro level as a community, as a society, globally, things like that. And so I'm not going to be delving into power exchange with regard to intimate relations, but I am going to talk a little bit about how we pose as individuals and why it's really important to understand where you stand in the hierarchy of dominance and submission, because I think that a lot of people don't realize that this is very relevant. So with that said, let's get into it. I want to talk about first how we pose as individuals. And I want to talk about something, and I'm going to be looking at my notes on my computer. I want to talk about something that is referred to as cognitive liberation. So cognitive liberation is essentially when you are able to overcome the barrier that makes you subjected or makes you submissive, I should say, to somebody else's power. Because for an individual or an entity or a group to have power over you, you have to be in submission to them. You're making a choice to be submissive. I think my lighting is going to go really wonky. So I'm probably going to turn on some other lights before I get too far into this. Hold on one sec. All right. Sorry about that. Hold on. I have a remote for my light. I'm going to try to turn it up. And I'll probably move this light around a little bit because the darkness is coming very quickly. I don't know if it's from a movie. Is that a creepy picture? Okay, so going back to the topic, cognitive liberation. Okay, so cognitive liberation is the first step in an exchange of power. Now, if you're comfortable being in a submissive position, if you're comfortable being submissive in your relationship, if you're comfortable being submissive in your job, if you're comfortable with your communal place in society and you don't have beef with it, you don't need to worry about cognitive liberation because you don't need to be liberated. But if for those of us that are looking to overcome systems, to build new systems, to create new power dynamics societally, we need to be very worried about cognitive liberation because it's the first step. We see cognitive suppression in ways that we can identify easily. So, for example, let's say you're going 15 miles over the speed limit and you see a police officer. That feeling you feel is being not cognitively liberated, right? You fear the repercussion that's going to come from speeding. You fear the authority. When we talk about, I did a panel I did an interview with O'Shea. It was the first interview I ever did on YouTube. And it was, can people who date interracially be pro-Black? And I was talking about how if we're all on a plantation and I say, grab a pitchfork, we're going to go kill Massa. Are you not going to make that move? Are we not going to work together based on the dynamic? And a lot of people were commenting, well, she's trying to get us killed. That is not being cognitively liberated, right? You fear authority. You recognize authority has weapons and guns and power. And so your mind is trapped before your body can make a move. Your mind is like, no moving, no moving. We have to keep things as they are. A woman in an abusive relationship, she might be very comfortable financially. So that those finances are a source of control. And so she may not want to live because she doesn't want to give up her lifestyle. And mentally, she can never get around leaving because she is not cognitively liberated. Sorry, you guys know my allergies have been acting up. So when we speak of cognitive liberation, we have to look at that any sort of social change we see. What's going on in France right now, which I thought about doing a video on, but then I decided against. But the thing that's going on in France right now, the thing the French are famous for is rioting. They're very cognitively liberated in France, right? They're quick to overthrow some stuff. They're quick to set some stuff on fire. They're quick to toss some things up. So when I talk about power exchange, I recognize this works in a relationship, right? Where there's a dominant party, a sexual relationship, an intimate relationship, where there's a dominant and a submissive party. I recognize this works in the workplace. You know what I'm saying? You're submissive. Everybody who works for another person, you're submissive to somebody. If you're self-employed, you're submissive to your clients, right? So we all engage in this dynamic. I recognize this works. Let's say when we interact with other people, women, there's always a dominant woman in a situation. If two women are interacting, if two men are interacting, there's always one man that's more dominant than the other. So when we talk about power exchange, we recognize that this works on a small scale, but it also works on a large scale. So that when we make appeals to do things about such as usurp authority and things like that, we're looking at a practice of cognitive liberation that occurs in a group of people that we then try to harness and move on to making a collective change. And what has to happen first is the cognitive liberation. Once you're cognitively liberated, what happens second is the exchange of power, right? So it's a process. You liberate your mind so that you no longer fear. And let me give you the actual definition of cognitive liberation. It was coined by a sociologist named Douglas McAdam, and it is the ability to challenge coercive power. Coercive power is the stuff that makes you afraid. That is, I have control over money. I have control over resources. I have guns. I can inflict violence on you. I have some level of control over your life. So it's the challenge that comes with getting over your fear of the coercive power that somebody or an entity has over you, and relinquishing the belief that the authority is legitimate. When we talk about, and this is why I always take, hi Nikki, this is why I always take issue with conversations about white supremacy, why I take issues with certain wording. If we mentally view an authority as legitimate, then we have a very hard time moving to any physical action that is changeable. So when we hear people complaining about, oh, Black men are getting arrested, or, oh, the IRS are thugs, why don't people act? Because they're not cognitively liberated. They have not in their mind processed that these are illegitimate authorities. These are not legitimate authorities. And in not being a legitimate authority over you, you can then move to power exchange, which is I recognize this person may be making a threat or this entity may be making a threat, but you're nobody. You don't have authority here. So now I'm going to usurp your authority. Now we're going to have an exchange of power. Whereas you were dominant and in power, I've recognized you're actually not in any sort of power over me. So I'm going to elevate myself into a place of power. And so this is hard for people to grasp, right? When we start talking about governmental authority, when we start talking about authority at work, when we start talking about national authority, when we start talking about situations Like in Africa, when they're talking about how the Africans can't farm the land and they're no good for this or that. When we start having these conversations, it's hard to imagine on a big scale. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about power exchange and positioning on a smaller scale, okay? Because if you can understand this and how it's applicable in your everyday life, then you can understand how this exchange can happen on larger scales, right? Because if you can't major in the minors, you can't ever play in the big leagues. Like, it's not going to happen. So you have to be able, and I encourage you guys to do this in practice. Have a social experiment. Find somebody who is in a dominant position over you and take the tools we're going to talk about today and attempt an exchange of power. Do this in your real life. Attempt an exchange of power. And if you can manage that, then you're one step closer to attempting to exchange higher powers and more pervasive powers. Give me one sec. Oh, you guys, my sinuses. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about how this looks on a small scale. Dark Prophet said, oh, hi, Jonas. Hi, Jay. Dark Prophet said, I know that's facts. I had an abusive mother, and I recently wrote an essay discussing this exact topic in relation to the Black community. Oh, thank you so much, Dark Prophet. I really appreciate that. Y'all, just deal with my sinuses. I'm so sorry. So I'm going to show you how we exchange power. We deal with dominant authority on a small scale. So let's talk person to person. So I'm going to go through some tools, and I want you guys to take these tools, and I want you in your real life to attempt an exchange of power. You do not need consent. You do not need consent. Verbal consent for an exchange of power. You need mental consent. Okay? So people can verbally be rebellious, but still be submissive. Do you know what I'm saying? There are a whole lot of people that function that way. They talk a whole lot of crap, but they're submissive. They're submissive to the systems and status quo. So let's get into that discussion. Oh, I'm so sorry. How long have I been muted? Oh, sorry. Okay. So what I was saying is that the first thing we're gonna go through the tools that people can use to do an exchange of power in real life. You do not need verbal consent. You need mental consent from the person. So the person can say anything out of their mouth. We have a lot of people that talk very revolutionary, okay? But they're not about anything. They're still physically and mentally submissive. So we are not caring about mouth service, right? We're caring about action. So this is why you can implement this in your everyday life, because once you get into a person's head, They're going to do what you want them to do. So the first thing is to keep your cool and maintain composure. There is a saying that the person that loses their cool first loses. You got to keep your cool, maintain composure. And what I was saying is we see this on an instinctual level. We know this, right? We know this about each other, which is why when you get into a fight, people try to trigger you emotionally. They want you to lose your cool, which is why if you've ever been in a confrontation with somebody and you won't get mad, do you notice they get more upset? Because on some instinctual level, they know that what they want from you, what they're trying to get from you is emotion. Because once you're emotional, once you lose your cool, you're not thinking clearly. Your judgment's off. You're not going to be doing You're not going to be working mentally at optimal capacity. You're going to be acting. It's all going to be instinctual. So the first thing is to maintain your composure and you're listening. Okay? You're listening not just to the words. You're listening behind the words to the intent, right? Because we say things to people with intent. So I could say anything to you, right? Anything. But there's an intent behind it. I always talk about a clip I heard of Oprah Winfrey who said, you can say anything to anybody. And I don't like this woman, but you can say anything to anybody. It's all in how you say it. And then she turns to the camera and she goes, you're so stupid. And then she continues on with her show. The intent behind the words, right? So we're keeping our cool. We're listening not just to the words, but the intent. But we want to pay attention to the words because we want to turn the words around. We want to use people's verbosity against them. So one of the most common characteristics of a dominating party, this could be an individual because we're dealing with it on a small scale. This could be an entity if we're dealing with it on a large scale, be that a corporation, a government, is that there is a level of aggression and intimidation. They definitely try to upset you. Like I said, that's why there's fear mongering in the news. That's why there's always a war. There's always an enemy. They intentionally try to upset you. They intentionally try to draw divisions and lines to make you uncomfortable. The thing is that you will never be on balance. You'll always be off balance. You'll always be off kilter. You'll never be centered. So you can never properly deal with them. And that allows exploitation of your weakness being the fact that you cannot focus. So you've got to keep your cool. You cannot be provoked. You cannot buy into fear mongering. You cannot be afraid. Remember, the base instinct that we have, one of our most simple instincts is fear. So we cannot have that when we're dealing with a dominant party, be that a person, a corporation, or a government. Fear cannot be a part of this life because that's what they're working with. They're working with your fear. They're working with you being off kilter. They're working with your emotionality. You maintain distance. And you also recognize that there are other options. This is when you're thinking outside of the box, right? You have to crawl up out of that box. We tend to think, and that's why language can be very limiting. You know, I always say I'm a nerd. I tell you guys, I collect antiquarian reference books. Why, Irene? Why do you collect antiquarian reference books? Reference books, dictionaries, encyclopedia. Why do I do that? Because as language changes and the words that we use have the ability to limit thought, what a person is exposed to is often as much as they can see or understand. So there's an element of control if you can control that environment. So we have to learn to keep our options open. We see what has been presented. We see the meal that is laid out on the table, but there's another room with a refrigerator in it. There's an outside where there are stores. There's a field where there are things growing. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm speaking in figurative terms, but this works the same with our mental state. So we see capitalism. We see consumerism. We see debt. We see democratic society, which is a society where the majority tells everybody else what to do, right? Unless you have a small group of individuals who vote however they want despite public opinion, right? Then a minority tells the majority what to do. But democratic society, where there's no freedom unless you're in consensus with the majority or the ruling party. So we see all that and we think, well, this is the only way it can be done. We look at the social structures we've seen throughout society and we go, well, we can only pick from these social structures that have been presented. It just never occurs to us that you can design anything the way you want. There's not some finite sort of bubble that we have to live in. There's not a box that we have to think in. So we're keeping our distance. We're keeping our options open. This is how we engage in power exchange. First, you're keeping your cool. You're not triggered. You're not moving in fear. The words are not affecting you. The tactics of aggression and fear-mongering are not affecting you. 2, you're keeping distance. You're keeping your options open. In fact, you're recognizing that what is presented to chain your mind. So we're releasing that. We're not engaging in that. And this is harder to do than you think. Think about whenever somebody says something that is challenging your belief system. You go on the defensive and the attack. You're so conditioned. We go on the defensive, we go on the attack. So this options open thing is hard to comprehend. It's hard to comprehend. It's an uncomfortable place to be. We can feel like, and I hear a lot of people say this, even my man is guilty of this. He'll go, we'll never overcome racism. It will always be there. This is crazy because you know what dominant parties want you to believe? They want you to believe there are no other options. Things will always be this way. We can only function in the beast. That is the goal. Your mind is chained, right? We have to unchain our minds. You will start to feel stuck. You will start to feel like there are no other options. We have to disengage. We have to stop reacting and we have to be proactive, right? So we have to recognize aggression, intimidation, and control for what it is. And then we can take our personal feelings out of the situation, right? Once we see it for what it is, we can remove our personal emotion and feelings from the situation. And then we can deal with the situation at hand. So we're going to, again, depersonalize it because it's not about you. All right? It's not about you. They want you to feel it's about you. This is whether you're dealing with an individual, or you're dealing with a corporation, or you're dealing with the government. And you have to start being proactive. You have to make yourself immune. You're going to want to start stepping into the aggressor's shoes, the dominant party's shoes. Because again, remember, why are we doing this? We're doing this because we're talking about an exchange of power. And the assignment for everybody, my assignment too, is to find a person who is dominant in your life, who is in a position of dominance over you. This takes introspection and honesty. We're going to find a person who's dominant in our life, and we are going to engage in a power exchange with that person. Where we put them in a submissive position, we take a dominant position in that relationship, and we're going to maintain it. Because if we can do this with one person, we can do it with 2. If we could do it with 2 people, we can do it with 10. This is how Hitler did it. This is how our government does it. If we can do it with 10 people, we can do it on a larger scale. But you have to be able to at least do it with one individual, which is why the assignment is to try these tools with one individual. You have a friend that's aggressive. What are we doing? We are keeping our cool. We are distancing ourselves. We are opening up our options. We are putting ourselves in the aggressor's shoes so that we can use their emotions against them. You have a boss that's overbearing. You have to stop recognizing that authority. Place yourself in a position of authority. You have to understand that a person, an entity, or a government that is acting because of their interests, and it has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with them and their desires. When we take out the personalization, we won't be as reactive. This is especially hard in interpersonal relationships, right? Because you know that your man is doing this because it's you. You know that your cousin, that your friend is an asshole because they have beef with you. You know that it's you. We're so self-centered. We think it's us. It's not about you. We think the government just really hates Black people. They don't care about us. That's why you could flip power exchange on people. You can flip a power exchange in a corporate situation. You can create a power exchange on a governmental level because they only care about them. They care about you to the extent that it affects them. That's all it is. It's not really about you. It's about them. And so we have to start to recognize that, depersonalize it. We do this on a small scale. We can move and do this on a larger scale. Let's talk about, before we get into how the switch of power happens, right? Because there are some tools that really are required to have power over another person. So first we've identified how we're going to start detaching our mind. Now we have to think of, how do we control the other individual? Okay? So there are just a few things that we have to remember. Yeah, that's true, Nikki. There are a few things that we have to remember about ourselves as we're protecting ourselves. And I've talked about this in other videos. You have the right to be treated with respect. I said there was an individual that I've collabed with who contacted me on some negative stuff in my personal email. And I set a barrier and I was like, don't email me. You cannot come into my personal space and act any kind of freaking way. You can't. So when we're talking about our homework assignment, right? Our homework assignment is finding one individual to engage in power exchange with. A dominant party we don't want dominant over us, that we are going to usurp authority over. But the bigger picture is that if my personal space and life are being affected by a corporation, by a government, they have no right to interfere with my personal happiness. This is not, I have a weird thing going on, but I have the right to be treated with respect. So if this individual, if this corporation, if this government authority is infringing on my right to be treated with respect, then a power exchange is needed. So we've looked at how we cognitively separate, right? We're looking at that separation that we need to happen. We're looking at implementing cognitive liberation from that dominant party, dominant entity, dominant government. Now we're looking at how we know where we draw our lines. Respect. We start with respect. We're drawing a line there. We're not going to be disrespected. Expression of feelings, your wants, your desires are relevant. Whenever there is a dominant individual, entity, government, they try to tell you that your feelings and your wants are less than theirs. It could be less than that person's. It could be less than that corporation's. It could be less than that government's. right? The collective wants and feelings matter more than yours. This individual's wants and feelings and opinions matter more than yours. We're going to stand on my personal feelings and opinions and wants are valid and will come before yours. Because remember, dominant parties, when a person is dominant over you, you understand when you walk in with your boss that their feelings, your boss's opinion, and what the hell your boss wants matters more than you because they're dominant. So when we're talking about power exchange, we need to understand what the mentality of a dominant party. Our feelings, our opinions, our wants are what matters, not yours. This is how we engage in a power exchange. We have to change the way we're thinking. Oh my gosh, I'm going to offend that person. Well, they want this. Well, their opinion is superior to mine. No. We can't engage in a power exchange with that mindset. You need to understand the mindset. You set your own priorities. If we're talking about an individual, they want you to be on their time. Dominant people want you to be on their time. Their time, because they are what matters, right? When we're engaging in power exchange, I'm off your time. We do this on my time. My clock. So we're thinking about that. I need you to make moves like that. No. I'm going to need you to make moves like this. Right? But we're recognizing that on a mental level because we're separating ourselves from the authority. We're practicing this with individuals, but the goal is to learn how to operate this dynamic so that it's not such a big leap to do it on a larger scale. If you can't manage an exchange of power in your personal life, how will you ever attain it on a larger scale? It will never happen. You must be able to do this with an individual before you can ever even imagine doing it. And the power in doing it with knowledge. We engage in power exchange all the time on accident. No, but we need to do this with intention. Intentionally exchanging in power with somebody. Intentionally taking a dominant position over someone who was once dominant over you. That's a different kind of experience. You become very self-aware. You're like, oh crap. Snap. I literally just took control of this situation intentionally. Not because the person fell back, because I pushed them back. So that's why we're doing this with intent. Your opinion and value system can be different than others. See, dominant people, ever been in a conversation with a dominant person? A person who's trying to exert dominance over you? You'll go, I think that debt is a bad thing. I don't think anybody should have a credit card. I think it's slavery. They go, well, there's a good kind of debt. You need at least one credit card. How are you going to live? I am entitled to my own damn opinion. A dominant person or a person who's trying to, a corporation or a government that is trying to exact dominance over you, what they will do is they will try to minimize your opinions and beliefs and replace them with their opinions and beliefs. They stick and move. You say something and they very nicely or they very meanly or whatever approach they use, they make the choice to let you know why what you think is not relevant and why they think is more important. Why? Why should your feelings and your opinion matter more than mine? Not if we are engaging in a power exchange. That only works if you're playing the submissive position. Now, if you're playing the submissive position, well, then get in your position. But if we're engaging in an exchange of power and we're playing a dominant position on an interpersonal level, on a corporate level, most importantly, on a governmental level, we can't fall for that. We cannot do it. We have to separate and understand that you are entitled to the isolation of your opinion and thought. And it does not need to conform. Why? Because we're out of the box. That goes back to what we were talking about earlier, keeping our options open. Keeping our options open. It's not the box that somebody puts you in. It's where you choose to be. That is essential. If you are not able to engage in a happy and healthy life and environment because of your interaction with an individual, a corporation, or a government, then you need to reevaluate that situation, revise that situation. And last but not least, and then we're going to get into how we actually engage in the power exchange itself. So all this stuff is self-awareness, right? I am self-aware. I'm going to keep my cool. I'm going to recognize the aggressions. I'm going to recognize the fear mongering. I'm going to recognize the tactics. I'm going to keep my distance. I'm going to keep my options open. I'm going to recognize that what I want, what I need, my time, my opinions, my decisions are what matters ahead of yours. After we do all that, then we're going to go into what you need to exact power over another person. First, you need your mind right, but then you need some actual power. So what can we use? What's our leverage for power? What's the leverage that we can use for power? That's what we're asking ourselves now. The 3 power leverages we can use are coercive, exchange, and integrative. Okay? Those are 3 forms of social power. Coercive power, I'm going to punch you in the face. I'm not going to have sex with you. You don't want to do what I want? You want to make me mad? No sex for you. Coercive power. Well, if you do this, I'll give you this. Coercive power. If you don't do this, you can't have what you want. Coercive power. I have a gun to your head and I'm going to blow your brains out. Or are you going to do what I want? Coercive power. I have a prison I'm going to put you in. Coercive power. That's coercive power. That's what that is. It's just brute force. Brute force or blackmail. Or exchange. It's something. I have something you want. I'm going to take something you want. I have control over something you want. Coercive power. That's the basis power, right? That's what parents go to. That's when somebody thinks you're a child, is they use coercive power. That's the power they're going to go for. I just smack you in the head. I just won't have sex with you. I just won't let you use my car. I just won't talk to you. Coercive power. I'll just throw some handcuffs on you and throw you in jail. Coercive power. How about I freeze your assets? Coercive power. It's really base, but it's very, very effectual. It's the thing we fear the most. It's that pitter patter when you're speeding and you pass up a cop. Coercive power. That's the first type. The second type of power that we can harness. So if you just can't go punching people in the face, coercive power may not be for you. If you don't have the leverage, coercive power may not be for you. Remember, this is perceived leverage, right? Because a cop could come today right now to arrest somebody on the street and 30 of us could get together and beat the hell out of them. Now, I'm not telling you to do it. I'm just saying, then we've had an exchange of power, haven't we? Coercive power won't work in that situation because we've established you don't have the right to come into our neighborhood and take anybody to jail, right? So coercive power is only as effectual as you are in submission to it because all power exchange takes submission, right? This is why I could argue slavery was a choice because for somebody to have power over you, it takes a level of submission. It just does. Give me 1 second. Okay, so the next type of power is an actual exchange, okay? Exchange power. This is when you really have something somebody wants. You could have manpower. This is like, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. That's exchange power. You give a little, I'll give a little. That's exchange power. Commerce is exchange power, right? We don't even have to like each other, but if you got $5 and I have an apple, we could do an exchange. You're hungry, I've got food. I want some money, you've got $5. We could do this. That's exchange power. Okay? Now, we can see exchange power and coercive power overlap. Sharecropping was a perfect example of that, right? So, exchange power is something else. We have coercive power, we have exchange power. You need to decide where your power lies. Then we have integrative power. This is the most powerful kind. The most powerful kind of power. Hi, twin man. Integrative power is the power that we truly have as a collective. That is cooperative force, okay? That's when a cop comes into your neighborhood to stop and frisk. And collectively and cooperatively, it is made clear there will be no stopping nor frisking in our neighborhood. Cooperatively and collectively. When we join together toward a common and collectively defined good, that is integrative power. That is where our power lies. But we must have the same objective. Do we all have to get along per se? Do we all have to agree per se? No, we just need the same objective. I might smoke weed, you may not. You may be a Muslim, I may be a Christian, but we all agree collectively that they're not stopping and frisking in this neighborhood. Why aren't they stopping and frisking in this neighborhood? Because we have the right to a happy, healthy life and to have boundaries, and our wants and needs and desires matter. See how it circles back around? So what do? We go to our integrative power, cooperative power. So when people say, I don't have the guns, I don't have the jails. Okay, so all right, fine. I'm not bigger than my boyfriend when he's bashing my head in. I might be able to knock her over, but she has a gun. When people say, I don't have the coercive power, okay, fine. You don't have the coercive power. You're not helpless. It's not a done deal yet. I don't have the exchange power. I don't have the you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours power. I don't have the cash flow to buy somebody. Okay, that's fine. That's just one type of power. But integrative power, oh, we all have that. We all have that. That we have. The ants have integrative power. Ants, you see how they move? Enough ants will mess you up as a full-grown human being. Let enough ants come after you, crawl on you. Bees have integrative power. It's all well and good until they swarm you, right? Do they have guns? Are they saying scratch our bee back and we'll scratch your human back? No. They got together and they made it clear, get the hell away from our hive. Integrative power is the most powerful kind of power. And that is the kind of power that we see the French like to throw around and play and dilly-dally with on a small scale, right? They're throwing a tantrum right now. Because some people's minds are less chained than others. They recognize if they throw enough of a hissy fit, their government will fall back because they will torch the whole city integratively, cooperatively, using force. But this is a hard concept for us to grasp these different levels of social power, because we tend to only think we need coercive power or we need exchange power. We think we need the fist, the guns, the weapons, the jails, or we think we need the army, or we think we need the money, the exchange power, the I'll scratch your back, I'll line your pocket power. We forget that integrative power exists. They're not alone. There are 3 types of power, 3 separate types, each as potent as the other. One more potent than all, I would say, is integrative, because you can have all the guns you want. You can have all the money you want. But if we collectively decide we're not going to use your damn money, it doesn't mean anything. If we collectively decide we're not acquiescing to your authority, it doesn't mean anything. So again, the assignment is to find an individual in your life, and we all have this person, right? We all have this individual who is in a dominant position over you, and engage in a power exchange with this person. And it's going to be for you to think about what we've discussed, do the identification, and do the exchange of power, and know that the biggest part of power exchange is submission. There is no dominance without submission. And so if you're already in a submissive position, then you got it going on, right? You already have the upper hand in this. So that's where I'm going to leave you guys off here. I'm actually going to be going into a detailed explanation of this on my Patreon. I actually started that prior to me coming here on YouTube to have this discussion with you guys. These are these lives that are not going to be the most flippin' popular lives that I do. And I just don't care. I feel like we could all sit here. I could be sensational. Do you know what I'm saying? And I could do some entertaining stuff for you guys, but that's just not my goal. And if you guys have, and I've been uploading my interviews, but people ask me all the time, like, what is your end goal, Irene? And my thing is, my end goal is to move this thing into the real world, right? To move it there. But as I circulate myself around YouTube, and as I talk to people and I interact with people, what I understand is that everybody doesn't seem to think that anything can be done. If solutions are provided, it's believed that nothing can be attained. And what I recognize as a person who recognizes power dynamics in life, who lives their life with power dynamics, is that there are a lot of chained minds. Do you know what I mean? And when your mind is chained up, it is hard to release from that, and it's hard to see anything bigger or that can change. But we author our own existence. We author that. And we have to recognize that about ourselves and move in ways that are effectual to the creation of that storyline. So if you can accomplish this with one individual, which is an exchange of power, you can accomplish this with more people. And remember, the end goal is that integrative power, right? It's a bunch of people who have experienced cognitive liberation. And remember, we don't need all, because people function like cattle. So you don't need all, you just need a visible minority. Visible minority. You do not need all. You need a visible minority of cognitively liberated people. Everybody else will fall into place. You see how a riot goes. All those people didn't walk outside wanting to riot that day. It just took a visible minority to act stupid. You see how thought culture goes. Every woman in society is not out here in a damn bikini, basically a bra and panties on social media. It just took a visible minority to make it acceptable. Just a visible minority. And all things work that way. So I always say, like, I'm not here on YouTube for a popularity contest. I don't have a niche. That could be my Achilles heel, right? That could be my Achilles heel. Because when I was very passionate about politics and what was going on during that particular time in politics, a lot of people gravitated toward that. When I'm very passionate about, let's say, submission, a lot of people gravitate toward that. But, I'm a multifaceted person, as we all should be. And I don't want to come on social media and start pretending like I only have one facet. Because my goal here is not to fucking entertain you. I'm not trying to distract you. I'm not trying to be something that keeps you from functioning and realizing and acting in the real world. I'm not trying to be, and be careful, because be careful of this. Be very careful of this. I'm not trying to give the appearance of revolution so that you can get your revolutionary juices out, and then when you go back to your real world, you are passive and submissive. You know why the Romans had their blood sports? Because it kept the people in check. It kept revolution down. So you get all your energy up, you have a spirited conversation in the chat, you hear some stuff, and then you go back to your own life and you're passive. Mission accomplished. But see, I'm not here to entertain you and to make you feel like I did this in the virtual realm so that you don't do anything in the real world. I want us to engage in healthy power dynamics with each other. And I want us to engage in healthy power dynamics with the corporate world and with our government. This is essential. This is essential. We have to become self-aware, right? That's why I said that brother the other day. I said, he's a bottom. He's a sub. He needs to be under somebody's thumb. He will be a happier person, but he's not self-aware. And some people thought I was picking on him or making fun of him. No, I'm just saying what it is. So if we're not self-aware, we cannot engage in power exchange. And if we're buying into the story of the powers that be, that dominant party over us, or parties over us, then we will never see past their agenda. We will only see a focused way to move within their agenda. And so with that, I'm going to definitely get out of here. And, oh, you just got the book? It's an awesome book, Nikki. It really is. Consider these things. In the description box, Nikki said she grabbed the book already. I list some resources, some research that look into how power is instinctual, that exchange, that acquiescing to it. There is a reason why our computers are watching us. There's a reason why commercials are so effectual. There's a reason why the government cares so much what you think. There's a reason why Bill Gates was up there talking about if we can get a television in every home in third world countries. It'd be the biggest accomplishment we can make. Why? Why is that? We have to recognize how the systems work because it's essential. I personally know myself. I know what I need as an individual. I know that I'm submissive in nature. And I know a fake dominant person when I see one. Do you know a fake dominant system when you see one? That's my question. Are you in submission to fake dominance? Be that on a personal level, on a corporate level, or on a governmental level? Ask yourself that question. Practice usurping dominance that you don't want to be in submission to. And hopefully we can revisit this conversation. Like I said, I will be doing a whole series of this on my Patreon, going through in detail the 3 types of power exchange: political, social power exchange, going into some other things like that. But this is something that I wanted to do here on YouTube. The things in the description box, I never put everything. I literally just grab a handful of stuff and I throw it in there just to get you going. But look more into this. Look more into not power exchange itself, right? But social power exchange. Posing, positioning, physical cues from a person, things like that. Those are things, because I need to go because this is a very late live for me. Those are things I didn't touch on this time, but those are definitely things that I want you to look at, right? Signs of submission, leaning on something that's weight-bearing, opening the palms, not making eye contact. A lot of times we think that's dishonesty, but it's submission. Coming in closer. Crossing your arms, crossing your legs. We saw our president do this, taking a submission stance. We often feel that's defiance, but that's a closed off protective move, right? But we view as defiance. When a person closes off, they're also being submissive. Think of a dog putting its tail between its legs. We're closing in. Tilting the head, making themselves smaller. When we think about submission, noticing, are we doing this when we're interacting with our test subject, right? When we're interacting with our test subject. I have a lot of information on this. I really wish I could delve a little deeper into this if I had the time. If we're looking at our usurping of authority and our power exchange for our assignment, we're checking our facial expressions. We're not doe-eyed. We're not looking up. We're not making ourselves small. We're sustaining direct eye contact when we're dealing with one individual. We're having that eye contact. We're taking the lead of the conversation. We're taking the lead physically. That means we enter doors first. We enter rooms first. We pour our glass first. These are microaggressions. Microaggressions. This is for your assignment when you're usurping the authority of that dominant person. We're touching them, but not in a gentle touch. It's a non-emotional touch. Hey. A dominant person is going to reject that kind of behavior, right? But it's a mind game for our assignment. We're getting into the head. We're switching our authority. We're checking our submissiveness. We're asserting dominance. We're firm. When we're shaking hands, it's not just that the handshake is firm. It's also that we are taking a dominant position in the handshake. These are microaggressions. This is for our assignment. Again, remember, we're starting on an individual level so that we can comprehend this dynamic on a corporate and governmental level. Blinking is going to become something that we're going to stop doing all the time. I blink a lot. That's very submissive. I have an interview I'm putting up with Tommy Sotomayor. I just was blinking, blinking, blinking. Y'all, you would think my eyes would never dry out because I blink so much. But when you're taking a dominant position, don't. Check your blinking. That's nervous. That's submissive. Stop it, because it's a mental thing you're doing, but they also pick up on the cues. That's one of the studies I included in the sources in my description box. People pick up on the cues on an instinctual level. If your instinct isn't to be dominant in a situation, I'm drawing attention to this so that you can choose dominance when it is advantageous to you, right? Because we do it on an interpersonal level first, and then we are capable of doing it on a larger scale. If you cannot be dominant intentionally interpersonally, you cannot be dominant intentionally on any sort of larger scale. Your words must reinforce your body language. You speak first. Submissive people don't like to take the lead. So they leave space for the other person to speak first. They do it subconsciously. The next time you interact with your test subject, you speak first. You lead first. Your hand is on top. Your eye contact is strong. You set the boundaries. You set the tone. You usurp their opinions and ideas and place yours ahead of theirs. This is for our test subject. And so those are just some last things that I want to just throw out there, some additional tools. But I want you guys to consider this, because remember, the goal is to manage this on an interpersonal level with the hope that we can bring this into a bigger scale. And with that said, y'all, I've got to go. I think I'm going to make some homemade pasta tonight and some kind of cream sauce. Before my man gets home, I have an hour to make this thing happen. So that's what I'm going to do. But thank you for joining me. Like I said, this is going to be one of those subjects that I am personally very passionate about, but everybody's not going to vibe with it. And I'm fine with that, right? Because we don't need the majority. We need a visible minority. I literally have thousands, plural, of subscribers, but all my subscribers don't watch all my videos. I was actually talking to another YouTuber about that. I said, how do I have so many subscribers and I keep getting subscribers, but my viewership is not showing that when I look at my videos? And I think that's because I don't have a gimmick. I don't have a niche, but whatever, right? It's like being friends with a bunch of different kinds of people. And so as long as everybody is staying, and I'm not losing any people, but y'all are staying with me, then I hope as you guys engage my videos, the ones that are for you, you'll love. And the ones that aren't for you, they're not for you. Every message is not for every person. For my bibliophiles in the room, I am doing another live. This bookshelf is going to be my cookbooks. So yum, that should be a fun one. Not too tedious and enjoyable. It may give you guys some ideas. And hello, Goodness Rated. Of course, authority always tries to put you back in your place, Dark Prophet. But only for a time, right? You have to be tried. You get your kids in check, but don't they try you? They try you again. It's the nature of things. That's why dominance is an ongoing thing. For you men and you women, don't we try our men when we're in submission to them? We'll try to push it. That's a natural thing. So yes, you usurp authority, the world will try to put you back in your place, but that's no different than any other submissive. Submissive parties, they try you. And they will usurp you if you let them. Right? We should expect no different when we try to place ourselves in a dominant position. What's my thumbnail? Well, my thumbnail is going to be different, whatever it is, because I'm about to change it up. Bye, y'all.